The honourable member for Athabasca, Sturgeon, Redwater.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes. Sir? Oh. Yeah, it is my great privilege to rise in the House this morning to speak in favor of the Modernized Municipal Government Act. I'm actually I think this is the way legislation ought to be done. And I want to really congratulate our minister and her staff for the fine job that they did. And I think that we've got a real jewel in municipal affairs. I mean, I've had a chance to meet a lot of the people working there, and I think they do a fine job. I had the great pleasure to be able to participate in the consultations in Two Hills, Lac La Biche, in Athabasca, and in Rocky Mountain House. And, you know, through my, as well, of course, I represent a large rural constituency. I've had an opportunity to speak on multiple occasions with councillors from Smoky Lake, Athabasca, Thorhild, and with MD of Opportunity. And one thing is that in one of my prior careers at the university is do qualitative research. And there's a usual kind of a guideline for when you know you've done enough research. It's when you reach what's called the saturation point. The saturation point is when you start hearing the same things from different quarters again and again. And I'm quite gratified listening to the members of the opposition speaking on the bill, that I've also heard similar concerns from stakeholders and councillors from around the region. So I mean, these are valid concerns, and I guess I would want to take a moment to congratulate first of all the obvious diligence and the collaborative spirit that the official opposition is taking towards this bill. I mean, I think this is something that is critical to the future of the province, especially critical for those of us in rural areas. And I really appreciate the tone and the attempt to be helpful. I mean, that's kind of what the opposition normally is supposed to do. And so I think this could be a wonderful thing to watch, to see us put this together. But, and also I think that some congratulations are also indeed in order for the former government for setting this consultative process up. I mean, I think this, as being part of that process, I think this is something that, like I said, it's an excellent way to make sure that all the stakeholders are treated with respect, and that when we put these things into force, that they serve Albertans well now and into the future. And especially important because, of course, I mean, the honourable member from McLeod, I think, was saying is one of the largest pieces of legislation. It's, in fact, I think, the second largest that we have. Sorry? Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay. Now, that being said, I mean, I guess I want to go over and just do a quick overview on I think our minister made an excellent speech, so maybe I'll just fairly quickly, highlight what I think are kind of the key points or objectives for this legislation, and then speak on a preliminary basis to some of the concerns that the honourable members in the opposition have raised. So I'll go ahead. I mean, this. I think that this bill has three main focuses, which we pick up, which is, of course, governance, planning and development, and revenues. And so what we're intending to do is, of course, is to work to strengthen a municipal provincial partnership by enhancing municipal accountability and transparency, and to strengthen municipal capacity and viability. Governance is something that, unfortunately, I think it's been long overdue where we do make some changes. I mean, I can speak actually from, experience from just even around my own area. Of course, actually, the honourable member from Lac La Biche, St. Paul, might remember some of the issues the county of Lac La Biche had some years ago with municipal governance, problems around that. Within my own constituency, of course, we had issues with the town of Gibbons, county of Thorhild, town of Athabasca, neighbors, to the west in Barrhead, Ormeville, of course, County of Westlock has been having some issues. And, these are actually real tragedies in these small communities because, unlike maybe some of the larger metropolitan areas, when you're having these types of conflicts that are not being resolved, within municipal government, you're talking about friends and families fighting with each other. And, you're talking about long-term, divisions in communities that don't help. And it's really painful to be involved in them. So, I think it's the problem we've had is that the MGA to this point is the only tool that citizens had when they have concerns about issues in governance was essentially a sledgehammer. As the opposition members highlighted, you had to go out, you had to get a petition, and then there was a whole long process, sometimes taking years, and, in situations where really it was more about municipalities actually enforcing their own bylaws and regulations properly. Right? And so with having the ombudsman being able to help in those situations, I think that's going to help a lot with that. So I think that's really positive part of this act. I think it's going to make a lot of people's lives a little bit better and less stressful, especially in rural Alberta when these changes come into effect. Now, the other thing that I agree, and I'm glad they highlighted it, is that when you deal with these councils when they have these issues, very often the problems have stemmed from where councillors overstep their bounds, let's say, where they're not quite certain what their proper role in municipal governance is. And, and very often it's very well-meaning, but, they end up being involved and intervening in areas that perhaps they shouldn't, causing conflict of interest and causing all sorts of problems, and then things start to escalate. And then this very often, I think, comes from, from councillors just not quite understanding just what their mandated role is. And so I think having that training component is also going to make it perhaps where citizens will have less recourse to have to go to the ombudsman to resolve these issues, because fewer of these issues are going to be arising in the first place. So I think those are excellent things, and I'm trying to think of. I think that we actually have pretty close to unanimity on this issue. I'm trying to think if the opposition has actually brought up any major objections. So that's a good point. Now, coming to the things around growth. Now, this is one thing is that I did also hear some concerns around the mandatory growth management boards. Now, just so members of the opposition are aware, said, well, do we listen to the consultations? Do we listen to feedback? Well, of course we do. And, on the online survey, over 50% of respondents, are in favor of these growth management boards. Now, those are the online respondents from the survey. Now, we need to make sure that the type of development that goes around our two major metropolitan areas is appropriate, coordinated, and sets us up for the future. And so, how can we have responsible growth and development of Alberta's metropolitan regions if we don't have frameworks where the different partners, have to sit down at the table to work things out. So, we really do need to work together to deal with increased pressures on our natural and built environments, and in order that we can capitalize effectively on increased opportunities for economic prosperity. Now, there's a lot of really tangible benefits that can come out of this. So, for example, instead of duplicating costly services, municipalities, be able to work together to develop more effective and efficient services. And I think that's be a real plus, and give us some real cost savings. They can also, work to encourage collaborative approaches so that we can develop infrastructure services that are used at an intermunicipality and regional level. And it's kind of hard to see how these things can be done effectively unless you have enduring bodies that do have some type of framework in order for these discussions to be able to go on into the future. Now, what are these things not about? They are not about reducing the autonomy of rural municipalities. They are about empowering them in being able to work effectively with their, rather larger neighbors. I mean, there's, there is also absolutely zero conflict with within these growth boards, making sure that agricultural lands are preserved, that you can't have granular, approaches to service delivery, and these other things. Now, of course, change is always a bit unsettling, and there are going to be concerns, but because of the excellent collaborative, relationship the province has been able to develop with municipalities, this open door policy, I'm very confident that these are going to be worked out satisfactorily, and that down the line, our municipal partners, Edmonton, Calgary, and the surrounding regions are going to be very satisfied with the results. And with the continuing help of the opposition, in case we miss any of those concerns. All right. Now, because of the other concern, just try to give me a moment here. Any concerns? Okay. Now, as far as for the intermunicipal planning, now I know that these intermunicipal planning agreements, there are some concerns, especially coming from the smaller rural municipalities. And the idea is that these are going to be kind of onerous exercises. I just want to ensure, any municipal leaders that might be listening to this, as well as to the members of the opposition, that nothing could be further from the case. I think that there might be actually interested elements that are going around and telling some of these municipalities that they need to hire all sorts of expensive support, accountants and lawyers and so on, and spend tens of thousands, maybe 20s of thousands of dollars in order to put these things into place. I would say that they might want to take a very large grain of salt with that. These are basically, these are things that can be very simple, direct, straightforward. If municipalities have ones that are already existing, there's probably very little work that needs to be done. If they need a place to start, as the days unfold, you'll see that there will, I'm quite confident, be plenty of support and assistance for municipalities to get those into place. And the results, I think, are going to be wonderful. For far too long, especially, some of the parts of, many of the members across the floor, as far as some of our own, I know that sometimes rural Alberta hasn't been particularly good at collaboration. It tends to be that, in fact, your nearest community is your long-standing rival. And I know if any community, if you're from a small town, there's another small town there where, those guys, right, we want to, if we can do something that helps us and at the same time harms them, maybe that's not a bad thing, right? But that beggar your neighbor philosophy is one that we can't afford anymore. And I think that most of us have gone beyond that. But there are, a few exceptions out there that might need some encouragement to sit down at the table. And from what I've found is that even though, sometimes you'll have these municipal leaders, because of course some are actually doing this already in advance of it. So I've had municipal leaders in my own riding that maybe haven't spoken in quite some time that have been motivated to pick up the phone and start working together. And when they find out is once they actually sit down and start trying to work out these agreements, they realize that they have a lot more interests in common than they might have thought, and a lot of wonderful avenues where collaboration will aid all parties. So I think this is really, I guess it's an excellent balance. Because I know that there were a lot of people concerned with these changes that what we're going to do is in actual fact enforce amalgamation. Now, nothing could be further from the truth. And so having a model that encourages and helps facilitate cooperation while still preserving autonomy for municipal officials, I think is the best way forward. And I'm glad that the other members also agree with it in principle. And just like anything else, of course, change is a bit uncertain. Devil's in the details, kind of thing. And I'm sure that we will be working to satisfy them as the days go on that. So let's see here now. As far as having mandatory development plans for municipalities under 3,500, this is something I've also heard, of course, from municipal councillors say, well, look, we have 2 staff people in our office. They've got 500 other things to do. This is another layer of difficulty that you're. And I had so much to say.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Under 29-2A, are there any questions of the member for Athabasca Sturgeon Redwater, the opposition House Leader?
Well, thank you, and I'll just be very brief. Just more of a comment, I guess, and if the member would choose to respond, he's more than welcome to do so. But just with respect to those plans and the costs associated with the plans and how simple they can be, I know that as a small municipality of 3,500 approximately, in the outstanding constituency of Old Didsbury 3 Hills, the community of Carstairs, where I once was on council and went through the process, they aren't just small one-page documents that are quite simple. They're in fact very involved. I noticed that we saw the government release an economic impact assessment yesterday on a one-page document on a $3 billion carbon tax, but specifically to the MDPs and other intermunicipal agreements, Mr. Speaker, I actually take a little bit of offense is the wrong word, but I am concerned that the member would say, oh, they're very simple, they're quite easy, because in fact municipalities take these planning documents serious, and as a result they are costly and do require resources and professionals, and so if we're asking them to be professional, we need to be cautious about how flippantly we speak about the importance of these documents.
Member for Athabasca Sturgeon Redwater.
Well, thank you, the honourable member for the question, and I guess commentary would be more apt. I was referring more to the intermunicipal agreements and updating existing ones. When you're talking about the municipal development plans, that's an entirely different matter. And if I gave the impression that that I was saying that those are simple and you could do it on the back of a napkin, I apologize. That was not at all my intent. Now, that being said, I mean, the concern around for the small rural municipalities is, they're saying that we don't have the resources and the time to be able to implement these. Now, of course, as days progress, saying that I'm sure that there will be assistance, or I'm confident. I can't speak for the ministry, but I'm confident that these concerns will be addressed. However, I mean, you have to think of the contrary. What does it mean if a municipality doesn't have a plan for its sustainability, if it doesn't have any idea of where it's going to be in 5 years or 10 years, or how to get there? Now, how does that impact their sustainability and viability if they're so caught up in the day-to-day nature of just keeping these communities running, which is very time-consuming, that they don't have any sort of strategic idea of how they're going to be sustainable into the future, which is of critical importance for a lot of our smaller communities where, you've got issues of declining employment, you've got, aging population. I mean, we do have serious issues without easy solutions to keep these communities sustainable, and I really don't understand how we could reach solution if they're not making sure that they're thinking about that future. So I guess that would be my response to that.
Are there any other questions of the member under 29-2A? Seeing and hearing none, the member for Calgary Elbow.